Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. This is a very important and special topic, in my opinion, and I'm glad that I'll be able to share it with you. So, as Mary mentioned, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am a trauma specialist. So the two protocols that she mentioned, I will be discussing further later. And I also wanted to tell you, how I happened to get up here. So Mary contacted me at the end of January because some of you would have come to see medium Jennifer Rose, if you recall, right? So she knew me. I was taking some classes from her. And Mary asked, do you know anybody who would be good for talking about grief? And Jennifer Rose mentioned me because I'm a therapist and also an intuitive. And so Mary wrote to me and she asked whether I would be interested in talking about prolonged grief from the perspective of the other side. And my first thought was, I'm not on the other side, I'm here. So I don't know whether I can fill an hour and a half with that subject, but I can talk about grief. So she also mentioned induced after-death communication to me, which is something that I had never heard about before. And it turns out that in order to qualify to do this kind of therapy, you have to be both a licensed therapist and trained in EMDR, which is a trauma protocol. Again, I'll talk more about it later. And I matched those qualifications. So it turned out there was a training in February. And I signed right up for it. I think the pathways were opening for me. I signed right up for it. And I was intrigued by the idea, and I took the class. So I became certified in induced after-death communication. And since then, I've been blown away by the way it's helped my clients, the clients who have tried it out, my clients who are struggling with grief. And I want to thank Mary for inviting me to be here and for inviting me to present on this subject. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I hope that you find this presentation to be as meaningful as I do. And what I want to say is, grief can touch us deeply, but it doesn't have to mark the end of our connection with others. And here in the Life After Life Club, we understand that death is not an end, that it's a doorway. So today we're going to start with a holistic look at grief. And then we're going to move on to an exploration of induced after-death communication, which Mary already gave a great introduction to you about. I'm also going to share meaningful messages for you that come from some of the authors who are specialists in giving us messages, psychics and intuitives, about the perspective of the other side. And I invite you to enter this presentation in our conversation with openness, compassion, and curiosity. Also, during my presentation, there are going to be opportunities for you to share with the group if you like, no pressure, but if you like. And given the delicate nature of this subject, I ask that we all be respectful and sensitive to other people in the room. Also, I do have time constraints. It's potentially a lengthy presentation. And so if I either don't acknowledge you or I have to cut you short, please be understanding. Don't take it personally. And I will have an opportunity for Q&A, questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So when we talk about grief, it doesn't matter how spiritual or religious you are. Every one of us has experienced grief in one form or another. It's not always about death and loss. But for this presentation, that's what we're going to be focusing on. And I've personally lost a number of loved ones, friends, and pets, and I understand how painful it can be, although each of us experiences it in our own way, okay? So who's heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? Just about everybody, right? The 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So what's interesting is the way it's been put out in the literature is as steps moving through to grief recovery, but that's not how Kubler-Ross first intended it to be, because grief recovery is not a linear path. We don't start here and, day by day, week by week, feel better and better and better. Grief is more like this, if you think about a roller coaster, right? And so you may be starting to feel like, oh, I think I feel a little bit better today. And then either you hear a song or something else reminds you of your loved one. And it's like, bam, you're right back in your grief again. And I just wanted to acknowledge that to all of you, that that's completely normal for us to experience it that way. Okay, sorry, we blew right through that one. So you can take a nice look at that. Oh, and let me ask you, who's heard of the EMDR? Oh, that's great, quite a few of you. Who's heard of IADC? Mary, okay. By the way, I'm also certified in grief therapy through Our House in Los Angeles. Okay, let's move on. So for this presentation, we're going to be looking at it holistically. When we talk about a holistic approach, we're talking about mind, body, soul, emotions, and also relationships. And hold on, let me move on my page. So I want you to think about this. I don't want anybody to sink into their grief here in this presentation, by the way, okay? We're just going to notice it and we're going to keep going. So just imagine your loved one has passed away. You've either buried them or cremated them, and now you're dealing with paperwork, finances, people coming to the house, people bringing casseroles, people making calls to you, and trying to deal with all your day-to-day stuff. So when you think about the mind, what can happen to your ability to think? And I open it up to you if you want to contribute. Take a moment and think about that. Sorry?
It goes wonky.
It goes wonky, right? It can go wonky. What else?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
When you have perhaps lost a loved one, whether it's a person or a pet, and you're dealing with all this stuff, how can it affect your ability to think?
Exhaustion.
Okay, exhaustion.
It short circuits your logic.
It does, doesn't it? So it can affect, we can feel confusion, we may feel forgetful, we're going wonky there, unable to concentrate, we may feel like we're in a fog or possibly even dissociating a bit, like not feeling present. We could be ruminating and playing the what ifs. What if this, what if that, right? We may be having flashbacks, reliving the experience. Or we may have black and white thinking, such as, I will never be happy again. Or catastrophic thinking. My life is over. What am I going to do now? We could have suppressed memories and obviously have a difficult time making decisions, right? So when we share our stories, it helps other people to know that they're not alone. I'm not asking you necessarily to share your stories, but I'm going to share a few of mine, although you are invited to share if you want. So my mother was already in a cognitive decline, and she suffered a serious fall that led to a brain bleed. And the doctors said that she would have up to 12 months left, and they were accurate. I think she lasted about 11 months. And since that time, I have been ruminating over these thoughts. What if my father, remember the what ifs, what if my father wasn't in denial about her situation? Because there was only so much me and my siblings could do. We couldn't control everything about it. You know, what if she had gotten better care? What if we had better home care for her so that this fall hadn't happened? And we try to make sense of these situations, but oftentimes there's no answer, and we just have to deal with it. So I'm going to move on to the body. So remember, mind, body. So now we're up to the body. What kinds of physical effects can we have? What happens in our body or to our body, or how do we experience it physically when we experience a loss? Does anybody want to?
Fatigue.
Fatigue, absolutely.
Sleeplessness.
Yep. Anything else? Fatigue, sleepless.
Not eating.
Fatigue, sleeplessness, not eating. Overeating. Drinking. Maybe. So it can affect us with that sense of exhaustion. We might be overeating or undereating. We may either be sleeping way more than we were before, or we might have insomnia, nightmares. We can feel muscle tension, headaches, chest pressure, blood pressure. Our intestines might be all messed up. Also, we might find that we're getting sick more often, right? We might have immune suppression, restlessness. If we already have an illness, we may feel more symptoms from that illness. Also, when we're under stress, the body releases more cortisol, right? And those stress hormones can really wear us out as well. And even our physical activities, we may be doing more, running and doing too much, or not doing enough. So when my brother died unexpectedly, it affected I have autoimmune, it affected my autoimmune symptoms. There was an increase in them. And so I want to bring up to you, it's really important to practice good self-care, okay? And what kinds of healthy things can we do for ourselves when we think of self-care?
Walking in the morning.
Walking in the morning. What else?
Massage.
Going for a massage. Yes. So going for support, whether it's with a professional or maybe a grief group. What else? Meditation, right? So those are healthy ways that we can do self-care. And basically, when we're dealing with trauma, and grief is trauma, we're looking for what I'm going to call, in terms of self-care and distractions, healthy distractions. So somebody, for example, mentioned drinking earlier. Maybe a little bit, but getting involved with addiction or getting involved with gambling and impulsive. Think about impulsive behaviors. Those would be what I would call unhealthy distractions. So we want to think about how we can do that, in a way that's positive for ourselves. So in our journey through our holistic exploration of grief, I'm going to talk about the soul, who we are as soul beings. And I think for most of the people here, you'll probably agree with me. I don't think of us as humans who happen to have a soul. I think of us as souls who happen to be in a human body, right? Having this experience. But even so, even if, we're in that place, grief can rattle us, even in our spiritual place. So how can loss and grief affect our spirituality or faith?
Doubt.
Any thoughts? Yes?
Doubt.
Having doubt? Absolutely.
Anger.
Anger?
It could either strengthen or weaken.
It can. You may either cling more tightly to your faith or spirituality, or you may move away from it. Right? So we might have, I'm going to give you a few more. We might have a lost sense of self. We may feel incomplete. There could be a lot of questioning about our role in life. And we might be feeling loneliness, right? And separation. Withdrawal from engagement in life, feeling worthless or inadequate. There might be that detachment from our religion or spirituality, or we may draw even more closely to it, which is great. Self-doubt. We can also go through existential crises with these questions. What is the meaning of life? Why does this suffering or this kind of loss have to happen to me or to others? Who am I now that this person or pet is gone? Is there any purpose to this or my pain? And then what happens after death? So before I was born, 1 year before I was born, my mother had a baby, and the baby was born with a defective heart due to medical malpractice, actually. Was born with a defective heart, and she only lived 23 days. And even though I never met her, I've always felt a deep connection to her. And I actually have had psychics bring her up to me, and I wasn't even expecting it. Excuse me. And as a child, I missed her. I even cried for her, and here I'd never even met her. So as an adult, I question, why would a baby be taken in this way? What's the purpose of living only 23 days? And even though I'm deeply spiritual, I still find these questions challenging. And I think it's perfectly normal to question, right? So we're going to move on to emotions, the big powerhouse in grief. What kinds of emotions do we feel during grief and loss? Depression. Anger. Sorry? Feel devastated, despair. Guilt. Anxiety. And what? Panic attacks. And
To stop crying.
an inability to stop crying. So deep gut-wrenching sadness. I also want to mention, somebody mentioned anger, and absolutely that's an emotion. I'm going to talk more about it in a second. I want to go back to the spiritual part, which is we can certainly, oftentimes, many of us may feel angry at our higher power, right? Or at God, whatever you call your higher power. So sadness, despair, hopelessness, anxiety and panic attacks, depression, guilt. Some people might think, why am I being punished? Or I should have done more, right? Self-blame. Could I have prevented this? Again, should have done more. I might have prevented this. Some people might even feel shame or regret. There could be fear, feeling overwhelmed, insecurity, shock, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, a sense of abandonment. And some people will stuff their emotions. And I just want to tell you as a therapist, they will leak out. If you stuff your emotions, they're going to leak out. They're either going to leak out with what I'm going to call self-harming type behaviors, or they're going to leak out with even more anxiety and maybe panic attacks or nightmares. They're going to leak out in some way. So if you are stuffing your emotions, I suggest that you find a way to get some healthy support so that you can express them. There are also emotions that protect you from the core pain of grief. These include numbness, denial, and anger. And anger is actually a surface emotion. Anger is an emotion that's easier for us to go to than either sadness, fear, or hurt or a sense of betrayal. So it's easy to get angry because we don't necessarily want to feel those deeper emotions. So, and that can show up, of course, as rage, resentment, irritability, impatience. So I'm also going to mention this as mental health professional. Sometimes some people may even feel they don't want to be here anymore. And it's really, really important that if you or someone you know ever expresses that, to please get help. The hotline number is 988. Okay, just going to put that out there. So talking about sadness, the story I'm going to share with you is about my horse. My first horse, his name was Cheyenne, and he was an incredible 1 in a million horse, and he was in my life for 25 years. He lived to be 29, so I got him when he was 4 years old. And at the time that he passed away, he was with me for over half my life at the time he passed away. And even now, when I won't talk about him too long because I'll start crying. Even now, when I think about him, I continue to feel the sadness about it because it was such a deep loss. I do feel like, see, I'm getting choked up. It was that profound for me. And I continue to feel that whenever I think about him. It's just the way it is. That's how we're built, right? That's part of what makes us human. So on our journey through a holistic exploration of grief, the last aspect has to do with relationships. And grief and loss can have a great impact on our relationships. So it can raise questions such as, who am I now? Because the dynamic changes in your life. And you will almost certainly have a new role in some way. And how do you work through that? Also, sometimes I'll talk with my clients about the new normal, but does it really feel normal? No. And we're trying to grow and adjust to the change. So does anybody have any ideas about how they might share how it can affect our relationships? I know this one's a little trickier.
Distance.
Distancing. Who said that? Distancing.
If others around you grieve differently than you do, you don't always understand each other, and it messes up those relationships.
100% feeling either unheard or misunderstood.
We can cling more.
Maybe being needier, and what if maybe they can't be there for you the way you need, and then you could also end up feeling abandoned in that, right? Yes?
Anecdotally, I can't relate to joyful or pleasurable activity.
Oh, right. Definitely disengaging from some of the activities that you might usually do. Yes?
Feeling isolated.
Isolation. These are all right here. I've got a list. They're all on my list. So we've got emotional distancing, withdrawing from social situations, isolation, less commute. Like, you may not want to talk. You just may not want to talk about it. Or you may really want to talk about it a lot, and maybe they're not there for you. the miscommunications, there could be increased tension, feeling judged or pitied, which, there's some people who really are like, please don't pity me. And I don't want to feel judged for what happened. Covering the pain to be strong. I'm going to be strong and I'm going to, remember that idea about stuffing emotions. The changing roles with which I brought up and how much that can impact us. Changes in intimacy. And also possibly, how you lose somebody and everybody's there for you. They're there for you. They're there for you. And then a few months later, maybe some of your friends are still there for you, but a lot of people have now kind of fallen away. So feeling abandoned after that initial support. So loss is a huge stressor. And as I mentioned, I've lost a number of people, pets, and friends. And for me, I tend to get more tense. It's just my personality. A friend of mine, when my mother died, she just wasn't there for me, honestly. And this was a good friend. And I got pretty angry. I was not happy about it at all because I did feel somewhat abandoned by her. And it can be really difficult to cope with the emotions, the exhaustion, as I mentioned earlier, paperwork, finances, all of this stuff that's going on at the same time. And that it's understandable that our behavior will reflect this. So for this, most of the people in this room, I'm also going to touch on aging and grief. And we're going through phase of life transitions. We may be dealing with chronic illness or declining health. There could be an increasing sense of loss of control over our life or over our body, a sense of disempowerment if we're losing some of our capabilities and those changing roles, uncertainty about the future, concerns about access to health care, facing our own mortality. And also, if any of us, any age here, are a caregiver, we can suffer from caregiver burnout, right? Either overdoing, feeling stressed out, having a hard time saying no, needing to be a rescuer for other people. So even if you're the most spiritual or religious person, it's normal to feel these reactions to loss and grief. Okay, so what's the root cause of grief following the loss of a loved one? What's at the core? Any ideas?
Change.
So there is change, right? And the change is this. I'm going to mention my brother who also, I mentioned he died suddenly. And for all of my loved ones who have passed over, I know they're doing great. I totally believe in continuation of consciousness and that they're on the other side. Again, whatever your perception of that might be, but I know they're doing great. There's no concern with that. However, there are times when I want to talk with my brother or pick up the phone and call my mom to share some happy news. My husband's in the back there. We have a new grandbaby. She's only 6 weeks old. I would love to talk to my mom and dad and say, look, we have an adorable new grandbaby, and I can't. And it's in this separation that the grief lies. That's where we sit, in the separation. And this leads us to our main topic. Hopefully I didn't miss a slide again. Induced after-death communication. First of all, I want to stop for 1 sec. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far? We're all good? Okay. So induced after-death communication, which I may sometimes call IADC during my presentation, it's a newer approach for grief recovery. It was developed by Dr. Alan Botkin, and he is the author of Induced After-Death Communication, a miraculous therapy for grief and loss. And he created this therapy. It is a modification of the EMDR protocol, and a whole bunch of you raised your hands before when I asked who has heard of EMDR. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an international trauma protocol. It's helped millions of people in overcoming trauma. And basically what happens is when we experience trauma, and I'm talking about grief and loss, well, not grief, but loss as a form of trauma, okay? First, and I also want to say that what feels traumatic to me may not feel traumatic to you and vice versa. So this is a very personal experience. Depends on how you experience it. So when we experience trauma, it can create its own memory network in the brain. When you're going about your days and you're having normal stuff happening, you go to the market or whatever, those are all memories, but they get stored what we call adaptively, meaning you don't think about, oh, I went to Stater Brothers, oh my God, and you have a reaction. You're like, oh, I went to Stater Brothers and I'm good. But when we have a trauma experience, it can end up in its own memory network and it can get stuck in a loop. And for the part of you that feels that, because I do believe we have different ego states, so that aspect of you that's wrapped around that grief, that part may not even know that it's over, may be reliving it over and over again. So EMDR uses bilateral stimulation of the brain, which has to do with activities we do that are right, left, right, left, right, left. That's what we mean by bilateral stimulation of the brain, to change those neuronal networks in the brain. And it's similar to REM sleep, except you're fully awake. In EMDR, you're not in a trance, you're not hypnotized, you're fully present and you don't lose your memories. And this therapy, another aspect of it that I love is that it's holistically based because it does address the cognitive, the physical, the emotional, and of course your memories. And when it's successful, and it's a highly successful therapy, it reduces the person's responses to these triggers so that the trauma is no longer being re-experienced, and it's more along the lines of, it happened and it's over. So you don't forget it, but you're no longer being intensely affected by it, okay? Induced after-death communication is a modification of traditional EMDR that focuses on the grief and the pain of grief and the core sadness that comes from that sense of disconnection. Remember what I just said about my brother, my mom, and for you, all of your loved ones. It offers the possibility of reconnection with the deceased loved one to reduce or remove that core sadness. I want to tell you the success rate. Okay, first of all, EMDR is an empirically based protocol, which means we have sufficient data on it, scientific data. IADC is not empirically based because in the study they did, they only had, I think, 79 people, and that's not enough to consider it valid. I'm just letting you know this. However, they did find that approximately 75 to 80% of the participants experienced significant relief from grief. And of the other 25%, 24% still saw a reduction in symptoms. So it's actually highly successful. Traditional talk therapy is approximately 30% successful, just to compare. And in addition, so when you do induced after-death communication, in addition to reducing that intense sadness, those defensive emotions such as guilt and anger, they're no longer needed because the client is more at peace. It's usually a briefer treatment, and it can fulfill that connection to reestablish, it can fulfill that need to reestablish reconnection with your loved one. It can only be performed by a licensed mental health professional. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not only trained, but certified in both EMDR and induced after-death communication. The experience is also similar to both after-death communications, which are known as ADCs, and near-death experiences, because we still experience that sense of reconnection with the loved one. Any questions so far? Nope? Okay.
How much do you charge?
I'll talk to you later. This is really important. We are not in control of the process. It's all up to the departed loved one. So we're not managing it. They're managing it. And I've learned to trust both spirit and my clients' psyches to take us where we need to go. It's going to take us to the right place in treatment. The messages come directly to the client. It's not mediumship. The results are loving and healing. And the most common result is, or rather, the most common message from the loved one is, I'm okay. That's the most common kind of message that comes through. The process requires that the client be open to the outcome. Because the thing is, we don't want to try to control it. The more you try to control it, the more challenging it's going to be. We just want it to happen in flow, to happen naturally. It can't be forced. It doesn't require a belief in the afterlife or higher power. And in fact, non-believers often make incredible connections. They're not hallucinations. Information that comes through can be things that the person didn't even know about, and then later they check on and it's accurate. And they can come through in the same way as, when you get those intuitive impulses, right? It can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be olfactory, it could be clear knowing, it could be sensory. And let's see. So sometimes the messages are conveyed on behalf of others. So let's say you come in to see me and, Uncle Joe comes through and says, tell your aunt, blah, 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 right? And these messages can be verified for accuracy, as I said. There have been cases where the therapist is sitting in the session with the client and both the therapist and the client get the same information at the same time. They both connect with the loved one. Also, negative content is not a part of the experience. That doesn't happen. That's not what it's about. Even if the deceased has been abusive, that's not how they come through. The messages bring love, insight, inspiration, and in some cases, they come through asking for forgiveness. Sometimes multiple people or animals will come through at the same time, and however you are, your personality, that's how you are on the other side. You're going to have greater insight, right? A broader view of things, but that's how they come through. Just the way they were when they were here, in terms of personality. They don't depend on special, I think that's right over here. They don't depend on special mental faculties. You don't have to have some kind of special connection in some way, a belief system, suggestions. It's not up to me to make suggestions to somehow make it happen. And it doesn't depend on intense grief. If you're looking to receive some kind of reduction in your sadness and grief, then it could be appropriate for you. So I've been able to do this with several of my clients, and it's really been amazing. When it's happened, we both feel a shift in the room. We feel the energy shift. And I had a client recently, she gave me permission to share her story. I won't be giving any identifying information. She lost a parent and she's been seeing me for a number of months now. We've been doing EMDR and related kind of therapy. And she lost a parent, and she's brought this up several times, the grief about the parent, and I had mentioned induced after-death communication, and she wasn't really interested in it. And so we were doing EMDR, and the grief came up again, and it was pretty intense in this case. And I said, listen, we're already doing EMDR. It's not that different. Would you be open now to trying it? And she said, okay. And I said, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much grief are you holding? And sometimes my clients will say, oh, it's a 15 out of 10. It's like off the charts, right? So it was somewhere around there. It was very high. It was 10 or higher. And we did the protocol, and I kid you not, in 20 minutes, she went down to a 1. It can happen really, really quickly, the shifts. So do you have any questions right now? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to read several case studies from Dr. Botkin's book to you, just to give you an idea about it. And then we're going to move on to messages from, the other side, from psychics. But do you have any questions so far? So is IADC something that can only happen with the therapist, or can the therapist teach the client to do this on their own? That's the question. So what clients can have is an ADC, an after-death communication. How many of you have felt a loved one come through? So that's an ADC. So we don't have to teach you anything, because remember, this is coming from spirit. It's coming from the loved one. It's not coming from the therapist. The therapist is acting as a guide, but the therapist isn't creating the ADC. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions so far? All right. So this is an example. Again, this is Alan Botkin's book. I'll hold it up again. Okay. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an example of a skeptic. And pardon me for reading, but I'm reading his words pretty much. Joe, a psychologist, was very skeptical about IADC. So he knew Dr. Botkin, and he knew that he was doing this protocol, and he was really skeptical about it. But he tried it to reconnect with his father, who had been insensitive and critical. Once he let go and opened to the experience, his father came to him warmly and lovingly said, son, I'm okay. Joe, everything is okay. Joe cried tears of happiness, feeling more deeply connected to his father than he had ever felt before. He said, my father's words meant that we shouldn't struggle with our fears about death. Joe then said, I have a real sense of well-being, a feeling different from any feeling I've had before. A few months later, his issues with his father were still resolved, and his memories of his IADC experience brought him a warm sense of well-being. So similar to EMDR, because it is a form of EMDR, it's not like a temporary fix. It's not like, oh, you see the therapist and you do it, and then a few months later you need to come back. It should stick, because it's changing the neuronal pathways in your brain. Okay, this is regarding loss of a child. Jose lost his infant daughter at 2 months old from multiple birth defects. I see her, but she is a happy, healthy teenager. She is surrounded by a soft light, a bright, soft light. She says she's okay and she's fine and happy. She wants me to be happy too. She reached out and gave me a hug with both arms and said, I love you. And then Jose said, I feel like a daddy again. After years of combat PTSD, that night he had the best sleep in 30 years. So he had that physical contact, right? Here's one about remorse and forgiveness. Jim had a cold and distant alcoholic father and tried IADC. During this session, he said, my father looks happier and healthier than when he was alive, and he's younger. Jim asked his father, do you have anything to say for yourself? Because remember, his father had been alcoholic, he wasn't really there for him. And his father embraced him with love, a love that he'd never felt when his father was alive. I both love and forgive my father. I could actually feel him hugging me. I'm sure that was really my father. There's no way I could have thought that up in a million years. Jim's sadness and anger were replaced with good feelings that stayed with him. And then I have one more from the book. This is an example of a message from the living. So this one's really unusual. So this man had a son with severe mental impairment. He couldn't talk. The son couldn't talk. And the father had grief about it. And so Dr. Buchan said, well, let's try IADC. So this is what the father said. He's thanking me for being such a wonderful father to him. He says, I'm here to look after you. This client added that he was told, I shouldn't feel bad about his medical condition because it allows him to experience both worlds at the same time. So it's pretty powerful, pretty powerful stuff, at least in my opinion. Oh yeah, I also want to mention this one. So, because I had a lot of them and I didn't want to bore you, reading one after another. This one is about pets. So this lady had her uncle come through on an IADC and he was with these dogs that she had known, or they were her dogs. And she had felt something jumping on her and it actually kind of scared her. And she had opened her eyes during the session saying, something's jumping on me, and she was afraid. And Dr. Botkin said, it's okay, let's just go with it. And she went back into that space and she realized it was these two dogs, Paris and Rinny, who had been jumping on her. And what's interesting is after the session that night, she felt them jumping on her again. Now, she had taught the dogs how to sit. And she said to the dogs, sit. And the dogs apparently sat because they stopped jumping on her. I found that humorous. Okay, so as you can see, overwhelmingly, those on the other side are conveying these messages of love, forgiveness, and hope to us. And I'm wondering, what are your reactions to these stories so far? What are you thinking? This is Alan. Alan was saying, how do we know that it's not just the healthy part inside of us who is basically creating the space of healing for us to get through the grief. And as I mentioned earlier, on a regular basis, messages come through with information that sometimes even the client doesn't know about. It can be verified. And not only that, because of the way it's experienced, again, whether they're seeing it, hearing it, or even feeling being hugged. I mean, you might think it's a hallucination, but for these people, it feels 100% real. Any other reactions or thoughts? Does a message ever come through that's not love and forgiveness? From everything I've read, no. It's not scary, even for my client who was really not sure about doing it. She was blown away. In fact, she was in her space. She was getting whatever information she was getting. And she said, am I going crazy? I'm having a dialogue with my parent. Am I going crazy? And I said, well, from my perspective, you're not going crazy. I think it's real. I mean, I leave it up to each individual. It's not for me to tell you what to believe or what to accept, etc. So we're going to talk about grief and loss from the perspective of the other side. Mary asked me to share, and I have to be honest with you, even though I have done readings, I can do readings, I'm not doing readings today, the best information is going to come from some of the authors who are out there, and I'm sure for many of you, these are people that you're already aware of. What's interesting is the information is consistent with Dr. Botkin's work. So, for example, there was one I didn't read to you. This father had been really, really, really abusive, and to this man and his sisters. I'm not going to go into the details. It was pretty bad. And he came through saying repeatedly, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. This is how my father treated me, and this is why I did what I did. And what was interesting was after that session, and the client said, it's in here. I'm not going to go back to read it to you, but basically he could kind of accept what his father said, and he was ready to move on from it, but he couldn't necessarily let go of it. And later that night he slept, and his sisters. So the reason he had gone for IADC is both sisters had committed suicide, and he wanted to reconnect. So both sisters came forward, and this is what was interesting. The sisters came forward surrounded by bright light, and behind them was the father in darkness. And this matches what, for example, Sylvia Brown talks about, where she'll say that those who have committed really heinous kinds of acts go to a dark place. So it's interesting to me that it matches up. Like a lot of what comes up in Dr. Botkin's work, it matches what the psychics are saying. Okay, so Sylvia Brown, this book, Life on the Other Side. How many have read it? A few? So she wrote a number of books, but this one's called Life on the Other Side. And this one's regarding around the time of, somebody passing. She says, please spare yourself some unnecessary pressure while you're in the throes of grief and shock after a loved one has died. Your most important task is to comfort, respect, and support the bereaved who are left behind. I'm going to add including yourself if you're the one, okay? The spirit of the deceased is already somewhere else and unconcerned about the size of their headstone, the view from their grave, or what anyone wore to the funeral. Now, she always brings a lot of humor into what she says. On the subject of time and our urgent need to hear from a loved one, she says, on the other side, where eternity is the reality, there's no such thing as time. So no matter how many Earth years a loved one has charted their lifetime to last, from our vantage point at home, she's meaning on the other side, they'll be with us in a matter of moments. And in the meantime, even in their most dramatic traumas on Earth, traumas on Earth are over in the blink of an eye. Regarding the deceased's experience, The reunion that takes place when we arrive on the other side is one of the most ecstatic events that we ever experience. We're returning home to the dimension we came from, surrounded by spirits we've known, missed, and loved through this and many lifetimes, both on earth and on the other side. The next book is Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters. How many people have read this one? Probably many. Okay, so Brian Weiss, my opinion, this is a must read. Many Lives, Many Masters. Brian Weiss is a psychiatrist, and this book is the story of a client with whom he worked. This client came to him, young woman came to him with lots of neuroses and issues she was dealing with based on her own life experiences. And he worked with her, I believe, for about 18 months. And she was doing better, but not quite as well as he would have liked. So he decided to try hypnotherapy. He was completely Western trained. He was not at all dialed into any of the things we've been talking about today. And he said to her, because he believed that she had early childhood sexual trauma. And he thought he would use hypnosis to see if he could get to that. So he said to her, go back to the time when your troubles first began. And he was shocked when she said, I'm standing in front of a stone building with stone steps. I'm wearing a toga, the year 1863 BC. And she proceeded to share with him, which is, for most of the people in here, you're like, yeah, we get it. And she proceeded to tell him how a flood had come through the village and ripped a child out of her arms. And, he was in shock. He was absolutely in shock. She proceeded over the coming weeks and months. She provided information to him about his father and his son who were on the other side, and proceeded to channel messages that come from very high-level spirits and guides. So he calls them the masters. She continued on in her treatment, but those messages were meant for him to share with us. They're very high level. It's not scary. It's not religious. It's for everybody. So if you're interested, this is a great book. Okay, so from Many Lives, Many Masters, about the fear of death. The Spirit Master stated, you must get rid of the fear. That will be the greatest weapon you have. So Brian Weiss pondered this and said, I believed it. So he believed that this Spirit Master's or this Master Guide's comment concerned fear of death, which is the fear deep inside the volcano. The fear of death, that hidden constant fear that no amount of money or power can neutralize. This is the core. But if people knew that life is endless, so we never die, we were never really born, then this fear would dissolve. If they knew that they had lived countless times before and would live countless times again, how reassured would they feel? If they knew that spirits were around to help them while they were in physical state, and that after death in spiritual state, they would join these spirits, including their deceased loved ones, how comforted they would be. I think it's pretty powerful. And then about spirit communications. Some souls are allowed, so this to me ties in with the induced after death communication. Some souls are allowed to manifest themselves to the people who are in physical form. They are allowed to come back only if they have left some agreement unfulfilled. On this plane, intercommunication is allowed, but the other planes, this is where you're allowed to use your psychic abilities and communicate with people in physical form. There are many ways to do this. Some are allowed the power of sight and can show themselves to the people still in physical form. Others have the power of movement and are allowed to telepathically moved objects. Has anybody ever had that happen? Felt something move, TV come on or off, lights come on or off? Me? Well, my father passed away. The TV was going on and off by itself. Many people choose to come here because they are allowed to see those who are still in physical form and are very close to them. I'm going to share one with you, it just happened. So my daughter was in her 37th week of pregnancy, okay? So approximately 2.5, 3 weeks away from delivering. And she developed a condition called cholestasis, which can be life-threatening to the baby and can come on very suddenly, cause sudden fetal cardiac arrest. So it can't be you can't monitor and say, oh, it's going to happen. It just happens. She went to the hospital, and the hospital said, no, we're not taking the baby out before 39 weeks. And her doctor was out of town, and I said, look, you got to go see your doctor. But in the meantime, before she got to see her doctor, so on a Thursday at about 4 in the morning, I was sleeping, but I tend to do lucid dreaming, so I'm kind of aware. My mother came to me, and her face was about this far from mine. And it was weird because I could kind of see myself looking at the two of us, and I was looking at her at the same time. And it came through as a thought. I didn't hear her voice. But if I could translate what it sounded like in my head, she said in a very serious tone, "Watch the time." And then she was gone, just like that. Now remember, she lost a baby. Remember? She lost a baby. And so I woke up, and in the moment I thought, is she afraid I'm going to oversleep? I mean, it was just ridiculous. She's not going to come through because I'm going to oversleep. So in the morning I woke up, and when I mentioned this to my husband, and as I'm talking to him about it, I had this big wave of like knowing and feeling and emotion come over me. I went, oh my God, she's talking about the baby. Now, I mentioned it to my daughter, who didn't appreciate it. she said, now you're giving me omens? But anyway, that was Thursday morning. She went back to the hospital that afternoon. They would not take the baby out still. There was a nurse there, though, who was very concerned. In fact, she hugged my daughter, and they were both crying. And she took it upon herself to reach out to my daughter's OB, the office. She called. And the next morning, my daughter, she got the test results, which the test results were done improperly the first time. So they came out negative, and she was trying to rationalize it. Ultimately, when she got the test results, they were positive, just so you know. But anyway, at 9 o'clock, she said, well, my test results were negative, so maybe it'll be okay. 10:15, she texted me again because she had gone to see the doctor, the OB, and she said they're taking the baby out. And they took the baby out the very next day after my mother gave me her message. So just want to share with you, they come through when they need to, I believe. Okay, the next book, James Van Praagh, he was here, right? What, 3-4 months ago? And this one is called Reaching to Heaven. And he says, about dreams and contact with loved ones, James told a woman, your sister wants me to tell you that she has been around you a lot. Have you felt her? And the woman said, no, not really. I've had some dreams, though. And James said, dreams are a way in which the spirit communicates. But I think your sister means she has been watching you. Your sister loves you very much, and she wants me to convey to you that she had to go. But she wants to hang around and enjoy the physical life through you. And then he talks about forgiveness and healing. So this woman accidentally hit and killed a little girl with her car. And she couldn't get over it, understandably. She couldn't get over it. And she went to see James. And she said, I came here to tell you, and James said, she came here to tell you that she forgives you, but you have to forgive yourself. She says you haven't forgiven yourself yet. She wants you to know that she is alive. She says you have to be happy for your grandson, Freddie, because she had been all despondent. She just wasn't really present for her grandson. This little girl likes him and wants you to be a good grandma to him. She says he wants a happy grandma. You must take care of yourself and forgive yourself, and things will be much easier in your life. And after he said this to her, there was a shift in her energy. There was a sense of lightness. And this is what a lot of clients will say to me. They feel lighter, like a weight has been lifted. And she was able to let go of some of that kind of somber exterior and the coldness. The next one is Pat Rodegast. Has anybody read her writings? She channeled Emmanuel? Nope. Okay, so she channeled Emmanuel and then compiled the writings with Judith Stanton. This one is Emmanuel's book 2, The Choice for Love. So this is Emmanuel speaking about dying. It is the language surrounding dying that makes the process difficult. If you will stay in the moment, you will not even know you have died. You are eternal. You will move from this life to the next in a breath. You will probably have to be reminded by the spirits who are there to greet you that you have left your physical body. All the fear and all the pain does not exist before the doorway of death. And then about death from the perspective of the other side, answering to what Mary had asked me to speak about in particular, you live a lifetime and then you die. You wake up and ask, how long was I gone? The being of light who is with you answers, we hardly noticed you were gone at all. You just sat down and dozed. You dozed off for a second, and here you are again. What kind of a dream did you have this time? So in preparation for this speech, last week I asked my guides to provide a message about grief and loss from the perspective of the other side. And my message is similar to the others, just so you know. I'm going to read it to you. Grief is a part of the human condition. From your perspective, this is how you show love for the departed. Those on the other side see the grief, but don't feel it. We are dancing, full of joy. There is no grief. The time lapses quickly. You don't feel it this way, but we see the bigger picture. We will be together again before you know it. The love bonds are never lost. So what are your thoughts about these readings?
Sorry, in the breeze, there's the puzzle lady. I just happened to look at her picture, and she looks like my deceased girlfriend in her late 50s, early 60s. And I'm gonna laugh at this and blow anonymity. My Al-Anon sponsor said, I cannot approach her and say that my girlfriend passed and I want to talk to you. So there's some comedy, that's it. So what do you think about that? I see people on dating apps that look just like her.
Sure. And I understand that we could, have that sense of familiarity. This is what I'm going to say to some of the questions. If this screen represents all knowledge, now all knowledge is infinite, but let's just say for this talk, if this screen represents all knowledge, how much do we know? Like a micro nanometer thing, right? So I can't necessarily answer all those questions. I will say my understanding is that our soul can appear in multiple places at the same time, but depending on when, it was your sister who passed? Your girlfriend passed? If you look at the timing and all, it's probably a coincidence, is my guess. But it's not for me to say, Any other comments about the readings? Yeah, we have one here.
I've been noticing in two particular situations with people I knew who were terminally ill, but not ready for death. They weren't close. And I worked many years in Children's Hospital at Stanford, so I'm aware of that. And both of these men died Saturday. And the thing that came up for me was, I think because the human race is becoming not afraid of death, that people just say, I want out. I don't need to wait till the end of my biology to die. That they want, I guess there's just permission to leave, to not have to wait. Does that make any sense?
Well, I'll share with you my perspective. I think that when we come in here, I think that we come in with a blueprint. We have a blueprint, and we have free will. So we can follow the blueprint, and if we stay, pretty close to that plan, things go, they're generally easier. Now, I can't talk about, those of you who have had hardship and all, whether that might be a part of the blueprint, a part of your growth as a soul, even though in the moment you may be questioning, what the heck, why is this happening to me? Okay, I'm not minimizing any of that to you, okay? But I do think we come in with a blueprint, and I do think that each of us has an expiration date. And when it's your time, it's your time. I personally don't think that they're necessarily hastening their death. I would tend to think that was their time. And the example I use is, why does one person fall off a roof and break their arm, and somebody else falls off a chair and dies? And I just feel when it's your time, it's your time. That's my perspective. Again, I invite you to see it how you see it. And by the way, this is not our full Q&A. This is with regard to these readings, to the things I just brought in. Do you have any other questions so far? Nope. Okay, so I feel the way I see it is Earth is our classroom. And by the way, it's a pretty tough classroom. This is not an easy classroom. We're here to learn and grow toward unconditional love as soul beings. I do believe there are many pathways up the mountain. Years ago, I actually did get a vision in which I saw a mountain range, a long mountain range. And I saw a few human forms, totally nondescript human forms going up this mountain range, each one carrying a really heavy pack. And when I looked again, there were even more. And when I looked again, it was just covered, and they were in all different places on this mountain range. And I think that represented that some of us are in kindergarten, some of us are in first grade, some of us are doing the graduate program. You know what I mean? We're all in different places, and that's okay. It's not that one's better than another, it's just where we are. And I asked, well, what's at the top? And they actually showed me a duckling. And I said, okay, what does a duckling represent? And they said unconditional love. So I do feel there are many pathways up the mountain, and I respect wherever you're coming from as long as it's not abusive. I respect all of that. So we grow toward unconditional love as soul and light beings, and then we return to our true home after each lifetime. One would say that this is an illusion, and the other side is the reality. This is almost like a hologram. I want to talk with you about my book. I wrote this book in the late 1990s. I felt like they were knocking on my head, wanting me to write down messages. So I did write these messages down over the period of, I think it was around 2 years. And they cover a broad range of subject matter, covering everything from spirituality to science, etc. And the way the messages came through, and the reason it says messages from a godly place, is the messages came through with, many of them came through with quite a biblical sound. Now, not religiously, because I'm going to be honest with you, that doesn't really even represent my personal perspective in terms of, like, I'll talk about higher power or divine source. I'm just letting you know. But this is how they came through. So if you do choose to get the book, look at it through your lens. It's in no way telling you what to believe religiously or spiritually. It's just how they came through. And I felt that there were probably at least 3 different guides coming through, because some were more poetic, some were more scientific, some were firm. So I do have this book. I put it out in the early 2000s, and then I just kind of tucked it away. And I feel that this is maybe a good time to bring it out. So I do have it available in the back of the room. Here's one excerpt from the book. Love is such a difficult concept for so many people. They struggle with its application in the earth realm and waste so much valuable time agonizing how best to express love. During our wanderings, we come across many different types of people, and yet they are all in the deepest recesses of their hearts just yearning to be loved. In jumping across the barrier to our side, you get to see a very different perspective. From here, love looks and feels like a kaleidoscope of colors, all different energies swirling around in infinite patterns. It is the ultimate dance of energy, brought to us as a gift from our Creator. No pain, no strife, no anguish, just a constant movement and interchange of energy, relentless in its need to be expressed. If you're interested in therapy for induced after-death communication, I'm happy to talk with you privately. I generally meet with clients virtually, but just in the past few weeks, I have become a practitioner at Laguna Health and Wellness. So I can meet in person just outside the gates around the corner. And then my information is in the back of the room. So I have a final poem from Emmanuel. It's called, What Did You Dream This Time? Welcome, beloved. Welcome, beloved. You have come home. You have laid down your burden of breath and stepped once more into the arms of light. Tell me, what did you dream this time? Did you dream of sorrow, of love found and lost and found again? Did you dream of separation, that aching illusion that you were alone? Did your heart break open wide enough to let a little more light in? Did you laugh? Did you taste the rain or the salt of your own tears? Did you remember even once that you were never truly the mask that you wore? Ah, dear one, you played it beautifully. You dreamed the earth into color. You let time touch you, so eternity could know itself in your form. There is no judgment here, only listening, only love. So, what did you dream this time? In closing, induced after-death communication reminds us that the veil between worlds may be thinner than we imagine, and that healing can come not only through memory, but through deep and meaningful spiritual connection. So this is me now talking to you from my heart. Be the light to counteract the darkness by radiating compassion, gratitude, love, kindness, and respect. Thank you, and may you be gently guided on your path. Thank you. So we're going to do final Q&A.
Your guides, hearing from guides, and you also speak of hearing of our loved ones. And I'd just like to know a little bit of the difference of that, of what's going on.
Sure. I can share with you from my perspective. Again, I don't tell anybody what to believe. It's very personal. I think that each of us has guides in spirit. And I think that sometimes a loved one can become a guide for us as well, in certain cases. And has anybody ever felt that maybe a loved one is watching over them? So we have a few hands, right? Your loved one, maybe, let's just say, for example, your grandma passes away and you feel her around you. You may even feel like she's sending some messages to you to keep you safe, just for example.
I was interested in knowing what is the difference, excuse me, between DIADC and other channeling therapies.
Such as what?
Well, other channelers, other modalities that do channeling. What would be the major difference between?
I don't know of any other psychological therapy that involves channeling. I do know that when I'm working with my clients, because I'm pretty intuitive, I'll have impulses come through and I'll bring it into a session as is appropriate, but I'm not doing readings in a session. So as far as channeling is concerned, if you're talking about maybe going to a psychic and having them channel, that can happen, or you might even channel your own information. But I don't know of any other endorsed therapy that requires a license.
Really appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you.
In my faith, which has sort of gone out the window recently, but hopefully will come back again, I don't really believe in an eternal hell, but you talked about the Father and the darkness. Mm-hmm. And in some readings that I've done recently, they actually kind of suggested that if somebody is maybe appropriate to go to hell, as the traditional view based on their behavior, it said that like your soul stuff just kind of gets recycled. Like it's not an eternal damnation. But then you were just reading the poem and it said there's no darkness. And how do you...
Right. So Sylvia Brown, I had a hard time grasping this one, I'll tell you, because I read through these books in preparation for this speech, just so you know. And she said that when a person has been, like I said, pretty heinous in their acts, they go to a dark place. And she said, and they immediately horseshoe back around and incarnate again. I was like, what? Because that's not my view. That's what she said. I suggest this. In anything you read or hear, whether it's from me or anybody else, take what makes sense to you and set aside what doesn't. I believe that it's important to be a healthy skeptic. And so again, I can't tell you, I can't answer that because I'm not there. I'm here. I personally hope there's karma.
Right.
I do know that those entities, when they recycle through, they have a hard time. I mean, well, I say I know that based on the readings.
Thank you, Audrey.
You're very
much.
welcome.
Mine is more of a comment about the bad people, if they come back or not. And I think in the Weiss book, there's a section in there about having to sort of earn your way back a little bit, kind of take a time out, that you have some responsibility to fix the problems you caused.
Right. He delves into, a lot of depth into the subject matter. You don't have to come back if you don't want to, or if you want to wait. But most people, I think, are on this cycle of wanting to continue to grow. As I said, moving toward unconditional love, moving toward that, kind of perfect union with our higher power.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. Amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to share something. I drove all the way from Burbank, half asleep actually, and all of a sudden I remember today is my grandfather's 61st anniversary. And something told me to turn to the right, and the name of the church was Thomas, just like him. And that was the only time I turned because I was really fixed on, driving.
Yeah.
So it was like instantaneous.
Yeah. So I would think he was there and was saying, I'm here with you.
Yeah. It felt good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know why I'm supposed to talk about this, but I'm just going to let it go here, is that I have a daughter, an adult daughter, who's developmentally disabled, but it's more of a psychological or a neurological issue than it is physical. But she exists on the fine line of both sides. And her father, my husband, died 13 years ago. And she will at times call me or tell me that he has come to see her. And it'll either be the young, happy dad, and they'll watch a movie together. And if the old, grumpy dad shows up, she tells him to get lost. And it's kind of, when she first told me this, I completely believed her. And I tell the caregivers where she's living to let her exist in both of these worlds because I believe she does exist there. That's where her brain is. And I said to her, so when the old grumpy dad comes to see me or makes a demand of me that I don't want to do, I can just tell him to get lost. And she goes like with this disdainful, of course, Mom. And I just thought, it never occurred to me that I could just say, stop, don't bother me right now if this is all you've got.
Yeah. I mean, you can, telepathically communicate back.
So, but it's just like, it is true. I mean, and she'll sometimes say, just completely out of the blue, she'll say, oh, the young, handsome dad came last night and we watched Snow White together. He was a Disney freak. So,
and this is how I feel about it. Whether that is, real or not, I don't see it as damaging. It's bringing her a sense of comfort and peace. And with any of, going back to the holistic approach to grief and all that and how we react, as long as a person can stay in a functional space, meaning that they're able to get on with their lives in some capacity, it's okay. It's when they are no longer functional, meaning their depression is such that they're curled up in bed, they can't, if you're retired, go about your day-to-day activities. If you have a job, you can't even get to work, that they need help, that they probably need professional assistance. So I do want to be clear about that.
We're at the end of the question and answer. There's a person here who would like to give a testimonial to be the last one to close us off.
This is Anne.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I've known Audrey for, over 10 years now. We were interns together. She was a marriage and family therapy intern, and I was a social work intern. And Audrey is who she says she is. When we were interns, her practice pretty much just went up and up and up and up, and grew very quickly. She is very compassionate, as you could hear and see. But she will also be blunt and tell you things that you need to know when the time is right. So then there was one person here that asked about how much she charged. I'm not going to tell you that information, but I will tell you she's worth every penny.
I did not pay her to make that statement. Thanks, Anne, for coming down here. Anne drove quite a distance. That was really nice of you.
And if we're done, then I think that we should give Audrey a great round of applause for a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.